Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining me for my first episode. This week I have the pleasure of speaking with Tiffany Scarmana. Tiffany is a nature-loving ginger who is originally from the West Coast, and according to her, she's been in Connecticut for way too long. She is a professional makeup artist for the past 16 years, and she's worked in everything from special events to editorial to TV, which is actually how her and I met. She is spiritually ignited through all things music, food, the moon, and her connection with others. Her wish is to one day have her own coffee house with a Northern Cali vibe, and knowing Tiffany personally, there is no doubt in my mind that she will make it happen. Okay, here's a little inside scoop for everybody. Not only is this my very first episode, but it's also my first interview. I knew from day one I wanted to have Tiffany on the podcast. She has been such a cheerleader of mine, always holding me accountable and calling me on my shit and just encouraging me to dream big. If you don't have a friend like this, I highly suggest you find one. So typically, I love to have guests who offer some type of healing service or modality that you guys can learn from, but also use towards your own healing. This is going to be a little bit different. I've known Tiffany for about 10 years, and just knowing her and how much she has achieved and overcome in her life is so inspiring to me as a friend, so I knew that I just needed to share it with all of you. We talk about Tiffany's journey to where she is now, growing up with a single mom who was in many abusive relationships, and how seeing that as a child has really helped to shape her into the woman she is today. She shares her story about finding her birth father when she was 37 years old, and I love hearing how trusting herself, trusting her intuition and her instincts has guided her throughout her entire life. I just want to let you guys know there may be some triggers for some listeners as we do talk about domestic violence and drug use. With that being said, I'm so beyond excited to bring you this amazing story. So let's dive in to this week's episode with Tiffany. This is Clarity Through Chaos, and I'm your host, Fiona Hardwick. This podcast features unscripted conversations that uncover and celebrate the chaos that has helped us to transform our greatest fears and vulnerabilities into clarity. Through spirituality, you know, the woo-woo kind, and self-development, because I just love to be practical, we are going to take a look at what has helped us to step into our own unique power, allowing for us to transform our most important relationship, the relationship to ourselves. Together, because I know you're ready, we're going to dive into the chaos and find our clarity. So thanks so much. I'm so excited.
Yay!
Okay. How long ago did we say we were going to start a podcast?
Oh my God. It's been forever.
Like years.
Yeah. And I feel so very profesh and fancy and grown up sitting here with you with this whole setup. So,
and I literally was like, Tiffany, you're going to be my first person I interview.
I don't know if I believed you though. I was like, maybe she'll forget about me. Maybe she'll move on to somebody else, and it's totally fine. I won't be offended.
No, but first of all, I love you because you're my bestie.
I love you too.
And also Corona 2020. Let's talk about 2020 really quick.
Oh, God.
A lot has happened.
A lot has happened. And you know what? It's like, you can't, there was a moment where I was really fighting it, as you know, because I'm used to being on a plane, I'm used to traveling, I'm used to working a ton, always having something on my agenda, my calendar. And then all of a sudden it just got wiped clean.
Yep.
And I remember sitting here looking around going, oh my God, I don't think I've spent this much time with myself since I was a child, and I don't know what to do. But now looking back, and I don't know how you are too, I'm so thankful for this forced pause we've been kind of pushed into.
Totally.
And even though there's a lot of heartbreaking things that happen, like with me, like losing Autumn, our cat, and just not knowing what life, the uncertainty of life and what that means. Right. There's so many things that I've learned. And I actually am surprised of how much time I love to have with myself and to be home and to garden and to cook and to spend time with my husband and us kind of getting to know each other more and just thinking about life in general, like what makes life life.
Right.
It's not grinding and hustling until you're tired and then getting up and repeating. That's not life.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I thought about, too, I was like, why do I love traveling and vacationing so much? It's because you're experiencing life. Like,
Yeah,
wow.
you're pausing.
What an epiphany. I mean, Jesus. And I'm going to say Jesus a lot. Love him, but I use your name in vain way too much, and I'm sorry, so don't strike me down. Okay.
All the disclaimers.
Please let me disclaim that right off the bat.
Oh my gosh. So a couple things you brought up there. First of all, the pause and like the quiet time, the reflection time, like that, I think from the outside looking in, because I know how you are, I know how you're always moving, going, doing things, like you had a really hard time with that. And I wonder, like, what do you think that was from? Like, where do you think that, trying to hide behind the busy calendar?
I think well, one, let me disclaim this. God definitely had a plan for me, and he knew how stubborn I was. So when I was playing tennis, he made me fall and tear my ankle and my wrist. So I had no other reason but to sit my on the couch.
Because you still, like, that was part of you fighting it. You were like, all right, I'm going to be home.
I'm going to go.
You started working out all the time. You were like,
No.
oh, yeah, I'm going to go back to my high school tennis playing days.
And then the universe said no.
It was like, no, sit down.
Yeah. But I think, I think what it is it really does stem from my childhood. Mm-hmm. And it's because I saw how hard my mom worked as a single mom. There were times where she had 3 jobs. I mean, she never even made it to a single one of my tennis matches because she was working so much. And it's not to a fault of her own. It's because she was just trying to survive. And she was trying to prove a lot of things to herself, too.
Yeah.
That I didn't realize that until now. But I'm kind of doing the same thing. So it's almost like these forced learned behavior that you're put into. And I'm like, I gotta save. I gotta do that. You know me. I'm like, okay, now I gotta get this paid off. And it's like every single week I'm like redoing my budget. To the point, I remember being out in the yard and kind of watering the garden. I've totally turned into my aunt, by the way, because this is like, it's like my meditation though. I walk through the yard and I had this voice pop into my head saying, you will not do a budget this month. You will not write down a single number. You will trust that it will all work out.
Wow.
And once I listened to that voice, because my stubbornness kicked in, I was like, whatever, like, what is this voice in my head right now? I was like, okay, I'm not going to. And I felt this weight lifted off my shoulders. You would think my old mind would say, oh, yeah, right, you're going to be more stressed because you don't know.
Right, of course.
But we all know what we should and shouldn't be spending.
Yeah.
Like, we all know what we need and what we want. And when you start
especially when you're so dialed in, and like you said, every month, every week, you're budgeting.
And I'm just like, Tiffany, and I keep thinking to myself, I'm like, Tiffany, you could die tomorrow. And what if you lived your whole life just budgeting?
And I'm really good point.
Oh my God, like that's so depressing to think about that. And it's a reality, I am so conscious and insecure of, I think that's why it took me so long to have, like, even think about wanting to get pregnant.
Yeah.
By the record, I'm not pregnant. Will listen and be like, wait, what?
As we're recording this, you're not pregnant.
Correct. Yeah.
But
because
who knows?
The flow is strong right now. So we know that's not happening, but you never know. We're trying. But it's like, I waited so long because one, I wanted my child to not know the stress of not having money, of not having food, of seeing me like grind so hard. I want him or her to see me at those, if they play tennis, that'd be great. But whatever sport they choose, or, a recital or anything, I want to be that face out in the audience.
Yeah.
I don't want them to know that stress. And I felt that stress from day one.
Yeah.
And even though I had my grandparents, which is so funny because they were my lifeline, I still saw enough to know that stress. So I think that's what pushes me into that crazy grind.
Let's rewind a little bit. So single mom.
Yes.
Grandparents were a big part of your life.
Huge.
What did it look like? Did you guys live together? Were they just very present, like you lived close by?
So what's funny is, my mom was the baby out of 5 kids.
Wow.
So, yep. And she always, my grandparents were always like taking care of her and always kind of, she's the baby.
Yeah.
I
Of
mean,
course.
Devin's going to be like that for you.
Of course.
She's going to be the baby. So we lived with my grandparents, I think till I was like maybe 5. And my mom got in a really bad, like, it's the first serious abusive relationship I remember from my memory.
Okay.
And we moved out, we moved in with this man. And then it's like, that was a whole shit show. Then we would move back in with my grandparents. And then at the age of 8, we all together left San Diego, Chula Vista, and went to a small town in Arizona, Prescott. Because my grandmother wanted us to get out of San Diego is getting really bad because of the border and the crime and all that. She wanted to raise me in a small town kind of environment where she knew I'd be safe.
Yeah.
And so we all went there together and we lived
And I
together.
wonder too if she maybe wanted that for your mom as well, like to kind of get her away from the distractions of the city.
Yeah. And I also think my grandmother was always chasing after something. I think it's something that I find is a pattern, like with my mom, and I felt it for a very long time too, until I was like, you know what, I need to break this.
Yeah.
It's one of those things of not facing your demons or your insecurities or your fears.
Right.
And instead just kind of running away and trying to find something that will just make you forget about it.
Right.
So I think that was like a lot of that. But then once we moved to Arizona, I was kind of on again, off again with my grandparents until they left my sophomore year of high school. And they actually were like, okay, we feel like your mom's stable, even though she wasn't. And they moved to Idaho of all places. I was like, I don't even know why, but it was beautiful. So fine. And then I would go just live with them for the summer. And then I would come back. And then I left Arizona to Connecticut when I was 21 in 2001. So that's kind of that in a nutshell. And interwoven throughout all those years were a lot of disruption and chaos, like with my mom and the relationships that she had with men. Right.
What was the first, like you said, okay, the first relationship you remember was pretty abusive.
Diego. Yeah. That was the first time I remember feeling very fearful for my life. Because I witnessed him throw her up against the wall and put a knife to her throat.
Right.
And I also realized a very strong defense mechanism that I had built inside me, and that was the ability to escape in my mind. I was able to literally put myself somewhere in my imagination, this box, this whole nother world that really protected me.
Yeah.
And then as I got older, he actually, the day before they were supposed to get married, she found out he was already married and had kids. His dad ratted him out. His dad was a kind man. And that's also another thing I realized. I didn't realize it till I was older, but I realized from that young age, I was able to read people.
Yeah.
I could sense their soul and like if they were a good person or not and their intentions.
So
and
you knew you could
I saw that guy. I
right
saw
away.
that guy from a mile away. I was like, this guy's no good.
And you were
I was
5.
I was 5.
But that's how, like, children are the best judge of character. Anytime my kids are like, I don't know, Mom, I don't even question it. I'm just like, all right, I'm going based on you. Because adults, we get clouded. We get clouded with the work and the stress and this and then that.
Outside,
But kids are so
opinions,
pure.
like
Of
all
course.
of that. And that make you question your own inner instinct. And listen, we're all built with instinct.
Yes.
Intuition, survival skills, all these things. We just rely on so much of so many resources other than our internal ones.
That is so
that we become
true.
kind of lazy and so disconnected from who we are internally. Who God has built us to be.
Yep.
So I think, as an adult, when I'm able to like really look at things and, I have a more broad sense of wisdom on like what I'm feeling and what I'm going through, I was able to see like little Tiffany saw shit coming and she was not having it because I also had this other strong contrast to my grandfather who was so the kindest soul that I will ever meet in my life.
Right.
Such a good human, like just that old school, that generation. He came from the generation of the Depression. He knew what it was like to live off of like a can of beans.
Yep.
And he was such a wholesome, would open the door for women and would just do whatever he could to supply for his family. I saw my grandfather's energy and it, like when I looked at him, it was just like this rainbow, like gold around
Yeah,
him. And then
yeah.
I would see darkness around these other guys.
Of course.
And I was like, okay, there's something ain't right.
What do you think attracted your mom to that kind of pattern? Because it wasn't just like one time. Like she continuously.
Yeah, and it's
had
so
these
funny because people are like,
relationships.
well, maybe it was a relationship with her dad. I'm like, no way.
Right.
I hands down, no way.
Right.
I think it could be, I know that when she was growing up, like she was a little bit, not fat, but she was just like a little bit thicker. She had her baby weight for way too long. Mm-hmm. And then when she hit her senior year, the braces came off. Homegirl had a body.
Goodbye.
And all the boys are like, hey. So I think with that, I think some people, like our DNA and how we are, some of us just have more insecurities than others.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think it is because of something. It's just because that's just who we are. And it's okay.
Right.
And I don't think there always has to be an explanation or this deep, dig of who, what is this, where is this rooted? I think that just might be who she is.
That's very true.
And being the baby, stuff happens. Like,
Okay, here's a side topic. Not really. But do you believe, like, I believe in reincarnation. So I'm almost like, okay, if something you didn't fulfill in your last lifetime, like maybe now you're here to pursue that and explore that. So I wonder if there's some kind of like karmic thing that she's kind of had to
I
work
totally
through.
believe in that because there's just way too many flashbacks, deja vus, or weird connections to places like I've never been before. So I definitely think, and I believe in that.
Yeah.
So I also think that my grandmother herself was a very kind of tortured soul in a way. And I wonder sometimes if that kept her from being, she was so loving and caring with me. And I
Yeah.
think she was trying to make up for maybe what she wasn't with her daughters.
Got it.
Because she saw maybe stuff, how strong they were, or something in them that she wishes she had. And it was like this threatened territorial thing.
Oh,
Even
that's
though if you met
interesting.
her, you would never think that. But I think that was the battle she was having in her own soul. So when I came along, it's like, we need to take this baby. We need to protect her. We need to do everything for her. And we need to make it right.
Right.
Which I feel is natural,
Yeah,
for
that's
grandparents.
like
I
what
think,
grandparents do. And I think, too, that generation, women weren't really, and even men, you weren't allowed to be who you really wanted to be. It
Right.
was very systematic. It was very like, oh, well, this is what all the women do. This is what all the men do.
You don't talk about your feelings with that generation.
Correct.
You sweep it under the rug and pretend it never
Yeah,
happened.
you're still surviving. Like you said, your
Yeah.
grandfather was in the Great Depression. Like, survival is number one. Emotions were not really considered.
So I don't have a definite answer like where that was rooted, but I just know there was a continuous pattern. And that first relationship in San Diego, if we are going to compare it to what happened in Arizona, was nothing. It was nothing. It was like just a bad first date.
Oh, gosh.
If we compare it to where she went when she got up in Arizona and hooked up with that guy, and that was a good 6 or 7 years of just hell.
And how old were you during that?
So I was 8 when I moved to Arizona, and she met him probably a good year after we lived there. And it went on till I was a sophomore in high school. So that's a good span of time.
Yeah.
And he was a big, just think of big old biker guy, like Harley Davidson. He was in which war? Vietnam. So he was a tormented soul.
Yeah.
And I can see that. He had a lot of demons.
Of course.
And he chose his vices, and drugs were one of them.
Right.
And that's how my mom really got wrapped into speed, like, cocaine, meth, stuff like that. And it's so funny because when I look back, when you meet her, you wouldn't think that she was doing any of those things.
Right.
I don't think she was in as hard as he was. And also there was just an abusive level to him, like verbally, physically. The first time I met him, I should have known about this. He brought me a Garth Brooks poster. I'm sorry. Like, I love country music growing up in Arizona, but I draw the line. Like, no young child that's like 9 or 10 wants a Garth effing Brooks poster. Like, buy me a Whitney Houston poster. Like, buy me Tiffany. Buy me, like, Paula Abdul. I don't know. Somebody.
Yeah.
Garth Brooks. So I hung it on my wall out of respect to my mom, and I literally probably motherfucked that poster every time I went to bed. I was like, oh my God.
This guy.
Get out of here. But I saw, when I first met him, I'll never forget. Like, I felt uncomfortable in my own skin when I met him.
Wow.
I just, if I knew what was to come, I would have literally, this sounds bad, but I would have plotted his death.
Right. And that was
Because
like as a child.
It was all this time that was lost between my mom and I.
Mm-hmm.
It was all this destruction that I witnessed. It was all the things that really, but I guess, you know, again, I'm a firm believer, and you know this, like, I won't change anything.
Right.
Because it's made me who I am. And I firmly believe that with anyone.
Of course.
But, God, if I had a choice in that moment, I might
Now,
have.
during that time, did the three of you live together?
So my mom finally, like, got enough to kind of like backtrack, got enough to move out of my grandparents' house. They were living in a nice little quaint neighborhood in the country club on the golf course. It was like, I love the house. And she's like, okay, we're going to go here. And we were living in like low income housing, which was a whole nother like carnival within itself. Mm-hmm. And they met. And, you know, when my mom fell in love, she fell hard.
Right.
She loved love.
Yeah.
Still does.
Yeah.
But I don't think she's been so destroyed by relationships. I don't know if she'll ever be in one again, which is sad to me. But he moved in. He had 2 kids from a previous relationship. And it was just like all of a sudden being excited that my mom and I are finally together again. Because the last time didn't go so well in San Diego with Homeboy, you know.
Yeah.
And then it was like, okay, you get pushed into this life that is someone else's and forced to merge lives together.
And that is like so traumatic.
It's
and
so
it
traumatic.
really needs to happen like little by little, especially at that age. 9 years old, like you know what's going on.
I know what's going on.
You
of
have
course,
your
I'm bitter
routine.
because I'm like, who's this guy? You know, and here's the thing. Let's be real. I'm real raw, almost to a fault sometimes. It's like, I'm growing up. I'm 10 or whatever. I'm hearing them like have sex. I don't want to hear. Who fucking wants to hear that? Okay,
gross.
number one. I'll never tell you the first time. This is a great story. I love it. Like, I'm in my room. I can hear them going at it. I open the door to their bedroom, and I yell at my mom, "You!"
Oh no!
And slam the door.
Oh no!
And then run out, and she puts on a robe. Tiffany Ann, you get back here. I'm like, no, I don't want to talk to you, you whore. And I remember shutting myself in the community laundry room, and she's banging on the door, and she's like, Tiffany, because the way that I found out about how people have sex, if anyone that is born in the 1980s can relate to this, it's so traumatic. I might have shown you the picture. It's called a book. Google it now after you listen to this. Where Did I Come From? And you're going to see this illustrated book.
Oh no!
Of these 2 people that this is what I thought sex was like. And you should read it. And I actually want to torture all children across the world because I think everyone needs to read this book because I want a support group. And you tell me if you wouldn't be traumatized after reading this book. The illustrations, it's like so traumatizing. So for me, sex and that too, sex became a very like dirty thing.
Right.
And it really like that stuck with me throughout like adulthood too.
Right.
Like it's like my personality wanted to be like very sexual and like comfortable with my sexuality, but I really wasn't.
Right.
Because it just was something like I looked at my mom and like, ew, how could you be, you know, with someone like that? Or you give me this book and oh my God, that was traumatizing alone. But so he was there all the time. All the time.
Like didn't have a job.
I think he had a job, but I think maybe in construction or something like that.
Right. It was like on and off kind of work.
But, you know,
Yeah.
weekends when I would get to see my mom, his kids would be with us. And, you know, the honeymoon phase is so fun in the beginning of relationships, but that thing probably lasted maybe 2 weeks. And he started to kind of show his true colors. And also there was not enough food in our house. Because either there was more people and my mom couldn't afford to keep up and they're also using their money for drug money.
Right.
So all of a sudden that food money started to dissipate, and we had to rely on like Catholic social services. And I remember just like opening the cupboards, being so hungry, and there's peanut butter.
Yeah.
And I would call my grandmother sometimes and be like, can you or grandpa come pick me up and take me to McDonald's before school? Because I was very fortunate to have my grandfather. He worked at my elementary school.
Oh.
And I didn't want to rat at my mom.
Of course.
Because I also
you had like this special time with her finally.
And I also didn't want to piss off him because I saw what he was capable of.
That makes
And
sense.
he was a big man, and he was abusive. And I wasn't scared of him. I just didn't want him to take it out on my mom.
Yeah.
He never tried with me. And I honestly think it's because he saw who I was.
Right.
That I saw him for what he was.
Right.
And I was like, come for me, bitch. Come for me.
It's so interesting how as kids we can see those things and how adults see us and the dynamic of like, you know, you love your mom so much. And you know if you say something to your grandparents, she's going to get in trouble and it's going to affect your relationship with her, you know?
Because even before him, I won't even say his name anymore and give him credit, but even before him, she was in a relationship, a friendly relationship with a female, and her sister, and that kind of actually started a lot of the introduction of drugs into my life. It wasn't that my mom was doing them at that point, but her friends, sisters, whole friends would come move in and hang out with us, and they would eat all our food. And I think they were doing mostly weed.
Yeah.
So whatever. But I remember my grandmother came to pick me up one day, and some guy that she did not know answered the door, and she's like, where the is my granddaughter?
Yeah. That would have
Ripped me
right
out of
the fuck
there.
off.
And my grandmother just dropped off groceries the day before, and they were all gone.
Oh,
And she's
no.
like, nope. So, you know, I also saw that very motherly, territorial thing in my grandmother that I didn't see in my mom.
Right.
And I think that was the toughest part for me because I wanted it so desperately in my mother.
And how old was your mom when she had you?
She got pregnant at 19, but delivered at 20.
Okay.
But I think developed wise, I feel like she was just young.
Yeah.
Still mentally and very driven by hormones, as so many of us are at that age. But it was that very territorial, maternal or paternal too with my grandfather that I saw this protective that I wanted to see so desperately in her. And the thing is that it was just her.
Right.
There was no dad to help the situation.
Yeah.
To say, you're not being the proper mother. Tiffany's coming with me.
Right.
It was just her.
And that was going to be my next question here is, where was your dad?
The biggest question ever.
Of your life.
Of my life. Yeah, I mean, he was not there. And anytime I question it, it was just put to bed. The first time I realized the story that was told to me was a lie was from when him went to try to find him to get child support so they could basically get drug money. I was in middle school at this point. I came home and there was 2 papers on the table. One said the man's name that I was told was my father this whole time. And then there was another name. And I was like, who's this person? And he's like, that could possibly be your dad. I was like, I thought
So this is the guy that your mom is dating.
Yes.
Is
We'll refer to as him.
Okay.
Yeah. The long relationship, the 6-7 years that they were together. So he was after trying to find my father so they could get child support.
Oh, wow.
Because they were running out of drug money. They need to get their fix. Like, you know.
Oh, my goodness. So up until that point, what was the story? Like when you would ask your mom, oh, where's my dad? Who is he? Whatever.
I told you, like, I don't know where he is. Like, we met at boot camp. We had, you know, a one-night thing. And I never tried to contact him.
That was the
because I
story.
don't know how. And that was it. And that's all I was told. And even when I would ask my grandparents, they told me the same story. So I was like, all right, well, what am I supposed to believe? Like,
Right.
I'm not Nancy Drew at like the age of, 5 or 6. So, I mean, there was no internet. Like, I didn't even know how the skills, if there were, to do it.
Yeah,
So
of course.
That was the first time I remember we had a tiny little single wide trailer that we were living in with a doorbell on the bathroom. It was great. I loved it. And he was in there. It was a 1 bedroom. My mom slept on the couch and he would come stay with us. And we were about 10 minutes from my grandparents. So that was nice. So at least I could escape if I needed to. But I remember in this tiny, cold, drafty trailer, just standing there looking at these 2 pieces of paper, being like, wait, what?
Yeah. Now you have a name, a face. You have 2 names and faces that you didn't have
But I
before.
remember that urge, like, oh, no. Someone's lying to me. Like this, how is this okay? I
Right.
remember feeling that way. So, of course, I questioned my mom, and that's when she goes, actually, it could be a couple different, I don't know. And I remember being angry at her.
Yeah.
How do you not know who you slept with?
Right.
Because
Doesn't
doesn't everyone know? Come on. No, they don't. There's a lot of people that don't. And that's
How
fine.
old were you at that point?
I was in middle school, so that puts me at like 11, 12.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's when I really, now I'm mad. Now I'm questioning everyone.
Of course.
I'm coming after Pappy, my grandfather, my grandmother, my aunt, like everyone.
Yeah.
Someone's not telling me something, and now I'm mad. But they all kind of put it to bed, and they just kind of pushed it away. And I lived with that anger the rest of my childhood into my adulthood.
Yeah.
Because it's like, people don't understand. Listen, we're all sexual human beings. We're all going to have not a perfect sex life. I get
course.
that. But you have to realize if a child comes out of that, you have a responsibility and a respect, and you owe that child an answer and the truth. And I wasn't getting that.
Yeah.
And I knew in my internal witch vibe that there was way more than people were telling me. So I kind of just stored it away and thought, I'm going to find him one day. And I would create all these stories in my head of who he was and where he was. And as every moment that went on in my life, like very milestone moments, I always thought about him in the back of my head because I'm like, wow, I wonder what it would be like if my dad was here. I wonder, would I be in this situation if my dad was here?
Right. Were you kind of looking for your knight in shining armor? Like
He was my knight.
He could help
Even
me.
though I had my grandfather.
Of
But my
course.
grandfather was, again, he wasn't an emotionalist person. He was very loving and caring, but you didn't talk about emotions.
Yeah.
It made him feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And he was my grandfather. You want him
Right.
to just be your grandfather.
Right. Right.
And I knew at a very young age that I didn't have a dad and I was different. I mean, that happened to me in like kindergarten. I understood that. And I thought, well, maybe this is just who I am. This is my story. But when you know that you've been lied to,
That's a whole different.
it's a whole nother bag of tricks. And I was out for people.
You were not.
I'm
having
taking
it.
you all down because now I'm mad.
Yeah, of
and I lived
course.
with that anger. And that
course.
anger definitely like festered and built something within me
Right.
that I didn't realize until much later.
So when you were a child, did you feel like you were powerful?
I did when it came towards men
Okay.
and protecting my mother.
Okay.
I felt very powerful.
And you felt like you needed to do that.
I needed to do it. She was like my child. I needed to protect her.
Yeah.
I had to. I also felt a very something spiritually on the other realm that I knew I was kind of sensitive to, and I needed to be powerful up against that, especially with my grandmother. I felt like she was very like tortured from the other side, and I could feel that, and I had to protect her. Didn't quite understand what it was until I got older, but when it came to defending myself, I didn't know how to do it.
Yeah.
I
It's
didn't
totally
feel
different.
powerful at all. I needed someone to do it for me. So, and I definitely feel like that when it came to boys, I was just like, oh, yeah, okay, whatever. I would just let them be and treat me however they wanted to, even though it was like, oh, hell no. One day, if I'm ever with a guy and he tries to hit me or say this or say that, I'm going to kill him.
Of course.
And I mean, I definitely still feel that way. But when I was younger, I would let guys just, I don't know, just be not nice to me and not stick up to myself.
Right.
But I think, it's It's probably how a lot of us are at that age. But
Yeah. And I think too, it's like being comfortable with who you are.
oh
And
yeah,
being like, no, I don't like that. Like, I'm not going to hang out with you. I don't like how you're acting.
now the
whatever.
real story is Tiffany now. To go back to Tiffany then, and y'all better watch out.
Right? Hindsight's always 2020.
Because I ain't dealing with any of your bullshit. I'm going to put you all in your place.
Yep.
And love who I want to love, hang out with who I want to hang out with. And if people have an opinion about it, I don't really care.
Right.
And that's
right.
how I am now.
Okay, so back to this whole thing with your dad. Mm-hmm. So you knew in the back of your head, you always had a feeling like one day you'll find him, right?
Yeah.
When did you really want to start actually looking? Like, was there a feeling of like, yeah, let's do this? Or was it something that you were like, maybe I don't want to know?
I think when I got to high school, I felt the urge to keep asking my mom. Mm-hmm. But then it went away. So I really think the biggest urge ever was after losing my grandfather. Because all of a sudden, the man that I had as my everything, my rock, my role model, the biggest father figure that I've had in my life was gone. Mm-hmm. I thought to myself, I'm like, now what? What do I have?
Right. And how old were you when?
He passed in 2013. I'm so bad with numbers. I'm like, how
I
old
know.
was I?
Me too. Me too.
Y'all could do the math. But it will be 7 years that he has been gone. So
So you were like early 30s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember asking him about my dad. Oh, and he was just, we didn't feel a need, to really maybe find him. We didn't know where to find, and you were fine. You were fine. They kept saying you were fine.
A story you told me. I don't know if you had overheard them or.
So when I really started digging the first time after my grandfather had died, I found out I'd spoken to my aunt, and she told me. She said, she was like, well, and then I think I talked to my mom too, that when my parents met at boot camp in Sacramento, outside of Sacramento. They were hotshots.
Okay.
Firefighters. And my mom was like heavily pursuing my dad, I heard. And they had a one-night stand. She found out she was pregnant. And on Halloween night, it was like raining. Her roommate took her to the bus stop. She left, never told anyone. Her roommate knew, and that's about it.
Wow.
Knock, knock, knock. Back at my grandparents' door. Hi, I'm pregnant. Bring her in. And that was kind of it.
Right.
But the story gets better. I later find out how many years later, like I said, you guys can do the math. She had left, packed me up, was leaving San Diego, driving to Sacramento to try to go find him.
Oh, wow.
And she got freaked out. She turned back around, went back home to my grandparents. They sat her down, and it was my grandfather who said, why do you need to find him? Tiffany is fine. She has us. She has your sister, your brothers. I think in that moment, when I heard that story, I remember just crying.
Yeah.
Because it made me realize why my grandfather was like, nope. He was also fearful. They were all scared this man
who they don't know
and steal me.
Right. Especially by that time, your mom has this track record of these guys that are just terrible.
They knew he would have a great chance to probably get a hold of me. Because even when my mom was pregnant and she thought about abortion. Mm-hmm. And then my grandparents thought about adopting me. And my mom's like, no, no, no. My grandparents really wanted to adopt me.
Wow.
And she said no. They're like, what can we do? But they knew with this track record and everything throughout the years that he would have a great chance of being able to get custody of me.
Yeah.
And then who knows when they would see me. Again,
or like they getting custody, but also him being a jerk.
You don't, I mean, look at her track record.
That's what I mean.
Jesus. They're like, who the hell could this guy? And, so when I heard that, I was just like, oh my God, I wasn't crying because I was mad. I was sad.
Right.
I was sad for my grandparents that they carried this burden with them their whole lives, that they were part of the reason my mom didn't search for him.
Right.
and that they were afraid that they were going to lose me.
Do you think they realized how it affected you not having a dad around?
I think my grandmother realized it more. My grandmother was a very emotional person. We spoke about emotions more, and I would, she was the lap and the shoulder I would cry on and bawl my eyes. She was the person I felt that I could fully be vulnerable and emotional with, and she was my cradle.
Yeah, she was your safe place.
Yeah, hands down. So I think that she understood it, but at the same time, I think they all were living in fear that this little ginger baby that they always wanted a ginger, and then I came along, we needed to protect her.
Right.
And they didn't want anything to come in the way of that.
Of course, which as an adult you can understand. You're just like,
yeah, and I'm not even a mother,
right.
And I can get that.
Yeah,
I understand it. It didn't stop me from being angry and full of a mixed bag of emotions.
Of course. Okay, so fast forward.
Yeah.
I remember when you went to go see a psychic.
Oh my God.
And what did that psychic tell you? This is after Poppy passed.
Yeah. So it was almost a year after he had passed. And I just felt this urge. I was like, I need to go talk to somebody.
That's so your manifester,
I know? It's, such an urge. And what's funny is I didn't even think that he, out of all people, would be the one to come through, because he didn't believe in any of this shit.
Of course.
My grandmother
it's
was.
always that.
And my grandmother took forever, years after she passed to finally come through. I was like, Jesus, Grandma, seriously? So I got there. Driana, you know her. I mean, this woman is gifted in speaking with angels, and she is truly, I swear, a disciple and a voice of God. It's nuts.
It's kind of freaky.
Yeah, and I truly believe, people give spiritual readers such a bad rap. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, there were disciples of Jesus that spoke the word of God. Why can't we have people now that do that? So I was sitting there, she goes, and I felt this cold breeze. Now it was November, so I was like, all right, it's winter, whatever. She goes, even me, the inner witch, I was a skeptic of this. She's like, when that happens, that means the spirit has entered the room. And I'm like, all right, okay. And she goes, did you have someone close to you pass, a male figure? And I'm just sitting there. She's like, your grandfather? And I'm not saying anything. I'm just letting her roll. She goes, pop, pop, pap, something. I go, Pappy? She goes, your Pappy is here. And I fucking lost.
Ooh, I have goosebumps.
I started crying. And she's like, oh, he's here. And, you can tell that he truly just loves you so much. But he is adamant. He has something to tell you.
Oh, boy.
He needs you to know this. I was like, Jesus, good God. I'm like, okay. And she goes, there's something that your mother is not telling you. And it has something to do with, and right on a piece of paper in front of me, she writes down David. She goes, who's David? He says that he needs you to find David. And I literally, I felt the blood drain from my body. I was like, that's my father's name. And he says that your mom knows more than what she's telling you. And he says that you felt that your whole life. And I'm like, yes. I was like,
finally, someone validated.
That's right, Pappy. That's right. And so then she just starts writing down all this stuff. She writes down 1979 and they'll write down stuff that may not make sense to you now, but could come.
Because Driana, I'm sorry, she just channels. It's like she meditates on you, and she's just scribbling on this.
She already
paper.
has a whole whole piece of paper, on you,
and all you give her is your first name.
I'm like, are you an FBI agent? What? And if you're not, you should be.
Yeah, she's next level.
She's just writing down all this stuff, and I'm just trying to take this all in. And then she went into more personal things that really definitely validated that it was him. Mm-hmm. And I just was you leave there. And, you feel like you are so vulnerable because you're like, this person.
Your emotions have just gone all over the place.
It's like if someone could just open you up and see everything. That's how you feel when you leave a really good reading.
Yep.
because, and it's wild.
It like rocks your world.
Yeah.
Like your world right there. Like it was like before that reading and after that reading.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, you know what's funny? Of course, now after it, I'm on a mission to call my mother because I'm like, I'm coming for you. I am coming for you. And when I sat in the car, I realized I had his wedding ring on and his cardigan.
Oh.
I was already manifesting it.
Yeah.
I was already channeling him,
Yeah.
and I didn't even realize. So I called her and I was like, Mom, Pappy from the beyond is telling me that you know more. She's like, Tiffany, I swear. You know, she gets very defensive every time.
Of course.
And I was like, okay, well, and then I was just going through everything the next day. Maybe next day or a couple of days after, I get an email from her. I have this picture. I've been trying to look for your dad, and I've had this picture for like 6 or 8 months of your dad. Excuse me? This is the first time I will ever be seeing a photo of him. So I remember I was driving. I pulled over at the side of the highway because I was like, I need to look at this clearly. Well, it's a group photo from the 70s, like late 70s.
Black
so it's all
and white.
grainy.
Yeah.
You know, it's all like grainy and like, you know, looks like a psychedelic haze filter over it. I'm like, what the? How am I supposed to know who this person is? She points it out to me. I'm like, really? This, you know, and you're looking at it and it's not clear and you're like looking for features of yourself. And that really like started the first phase of looking for him, which eventually we got a lot of people involved that knew them when they were hot shots. We got a lot of heavy leads to it. And then I got so emotionally overwhelmed, and I was then started to feel that anger again. I'm like, why am I doing all this? You should be doing it. You're the one who slept with him and didn't get his, you know, social security number before you left. Like, you need to be. And I put it in her hands, and then it hit a roadblock.
Yeah.
And then that was it. It fizzled out.
Right.
And then the second time.
Which it probably wasn't for her to figure out, like, is probably for you.
And maybe
you
it
know?
wasn't the right time.
Of course.
You know, even though I think of that, I'm like, Jesus, when will be the right time? It's like I'm in my 30s at this point.
Right. You're like,
So,
what, 35?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah.
Because then fast forward a couple years, I'm at the Masters and I have long days, but I have a nice gap in the afternoon. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking about my grandfather because he loved golf. He always had the Masters on like every year. So being there was very nostalgic for me, thinking like, God, if he was alive, he'd be so... And I was thinking about him and this voice popped in my head. And it was my grandfather. And he said, it's time for you to find him. You need to start again. Don't be scared.
Oh my God.
And I started writing all the things that I remember from the first search,
Right.
all the things that Driana said, all the things that my mom said. Call my mom back up. And I was like, okay, what about that? What about... And within like 2 or 3 days, I collected so much information.
Wow. Look at that.
And I felt this urge inside of me that it was like a magnet between my father and I. And you could feel the energy getting closer and the connection tighter and tighter and tighter. Like I literally could feel it in my gut.
Right.
And it was just wild to me because afterwards, I looked back at my journal, and in February that year of 2018, I said, I will find my father this year. I put it out there.
Yep.
I knew it in my soul.
Yep. That's
So,
your witch vibe coming through.
I came back, to Connecticut, and I was done at the Masters, and I connected with, because I was thinking, I was like, when I was at the Masters, I'm like, okay, what other resources? I feel like I can't hit that roadblock again. Mm-hmm. What other resources? I'm like, wait, I did Ancestry. Let me go on there. Because at this point, I now, through all this research, know his last name, which was huge, a potential last name.
Right.
So I'm like, let me go back in. There sitting, I swear, just like on a throne was a third cousin match with the same last name, and the third cousin's a ginger. And I thought to myself, I'm like, all right, like this is like, wait, how long has this been sitting here?
Right.
But I just didn't have all the puzzle pieces.
Right.
So I contact this potential third cousin and I'm telling him the story. I'm like, this man's going to think I'm fucking nuts. Because I've already contacted like over 100 people that match my dad's name. And I got, no, that's not me. Or they would send me a picture and it'd be a black guy. He's like, no, sorry. Like, I'm like, man, I wish. I really was hoping, actually, because it would make a lot of sense if I had a little,
Yeah.
of that in me.
Culture.
But, yep. God, I wish. But then he's like, oh my God, actually, I think I might have found your guy. And this is all happening. I'm back in Connecticut.
Yeah. It's days.
Oh,
Like,
days. And because I remember being at Malexi Salon, our friend, and I was like, Malexi, oh my God, I got an email. This guy might be my cousin, and I think he might just found my dad. Malexi's like, oh my goodness, I need to sit down. She's Puerto Rican. So you know how she is. With her hands, she's like, oh my goodness, I can't take this. And I'm just like, is this happening? He sends me a screenshot of my dad's Facebook page.
Oh my God.
But there's no contact info. There's nothing. So I'm on there and I'm looking at this man and I'm like, I think I see myself in him.
Right.
Like, I don't know.
Right.
And then, so I did some more research, and then I found a possible best friend of his. So I call this guy. Now I'm like cold calling. I'm like a telemarketer at this point. Like, all in the back of my head, I'm thinking to myself, I could possibly be changing someone's life for the good or for the bad.
Right.
And that was something I knew going in. I had to be ready for rejection, a hard rejection.
That's so hard.
Because think about it, being a child and being rejected by your parent. I don't.
Literally, there are no words. That's like it's like death.
And for me, I've lost my grandparents. I kind of already feel like I don't have a connection with my mom. So it was a big risk emotionally taking it on and diving headfirst and be like, you know what? At this point, I've survived all this. I can get through this. Mm-hmm. So I was at work and I spoke with this best friend, and he's telling me memories and stories and this and that. And I remember getting off and I just sat down in the green room and I just bawled my eyes out.
Yeah, you're at work.
Because I was like, and I was with like people that were like, what the hell's going on with her? And not close friends. So I felt very, to be, me, I'm not vulnerable around people that I don't trust. I couldn't help it. It's like the floodgates opened. I was like, oh my God, like that. I possibly just got the phone with my dad, one of my dad's best friends, and
like
hearing memories of him.
Or like from when they were young.
Yeah. And just hearing memories that could be about my dad.
Of course.
And I'm like, oh my God. It was just the closest I had ever been. And then. And you're part of this because,
That's where it gets juicy.
I'm on the couch with Chris one night. A couple days later, after speaking to his, best friend from back in the day, I get an email. Because I had sent emails with the picture saying, hi, I didn't say why.
Right. You had a few names in the area that you thought he lived.
Right.
So you
the
had
same name. Yeah.
People.
So I just, again, cold call and email like a telemarketer.
Yeah.
And I would just attach the picture and I would briefly say, hi, I'm looking for so-and-so from Fire Center, 1980-81. Do you recognize this picture? Is this you in the photo? Whatever. Okay. And didn't say why I'm looking because it's kind of sneaky. Sorry, Dad. And sent it off. I get this email back, and I'll never forget the moment. I'm sitting on the couch with Chris, my husband, and I get, yeah, that's me. Wow, it's been a long time. Why are you asking? And I remember, I did not have control over my hands. I just started typing. I said, okay, awesome. But it's like, really, it's like, okay, great. I'm about to fuck up your life and turn it upside down. So I was like, okay, awesome. Like, well, I hate to say this over email, but there's a potential that you may be my father. I mean, mic drop.
Send.
Mic drop.
Sent it.
Chris is like, we did it. What did you just say? I go, I just sent an email, I think, to my dad. I think I just found my dad. And his mouth like stayed open, I think, for a good hour.
You and Chris have been together since college.
Yeah.
So he's known you your whole adult life.
He's known the journey. Like, he'd met my grandparents.
Right.
Like, he's
been through the ups and downs and all of that.
Poor man might deserve an award by the time he's done with me. Yeah. So he's been on the roller coaster. So he's invested, right? So I did not sleep that night.
No. And now we worked together the next morning.
So I had maybe 2 hours of sleep.
Yep.
And
we came in looking a hot mess.
But wait, because it's an early shift, so I think I came in like 5:30.
Yep.
I sent another email at 4 a.m. because I have not heard back from him. I'm like, I just want to let you know I'm not a crazy person. Here's my Facebook. Here's my Instagram. You guys, I don't want your money. I don't want your money. I just want to know who you are. I just want to know the other half of me. Like I wanted so desperately to just let him know I'm not a fucking psycho.
Of course.
And I don't want all your money. I don't need your routing number to your bank account.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not after that.
Yeah.
Did he hear anything? So I come into work, I'm like,
strung
you
out.
guys, I'm telling you. And then we have our first talent in the chair for the morning. And I wasn't doing her makeup. So I'm sitting there telling her whole story. And she's just like, Nicole's like, oh my God, like what is happening?
This is wild.
And as we're speaking about it, ding, inbox. And I'm like, oh my God, you guys, he responded. And I think the world just stopped.
We all stopped what we were doing.
And I started reading the first sentence. And that first sentence solidified where it was going to go.
Yeah.
And I saw the first seconds of my life change because I saw that it was going to go in the best way. And I just started crying, and I gave the phone to you. I was like, can you read this? Because I was just sobbing. I literally not crying. Like I was
sobbing.
Yeah.
Like you couldn't breathe.
I couldn't breathe. I couldn't. It's like I honestly, in my head, it's like I almost was transformed and rewound back to that little girl that was just so curious and like wondering who this person was, and to be able to like go back and say, it's going to be okay. Like,
right.
You don't have to worry.
Right.
Like, this is going to work out.
That puzzle came together.
And I remember you reading it, and I was just sobbing. I couldn't grasp what was happening. It's like one of those surreal moments that you're just like, is this a movie, or is this my life, or what is happening?
The thing is, that email, his kindness and his compassion. I'm an ice queen, and I was
You were
crying.
I know. I was like, it even got feet.
And then everybody's like, what the hell's going on? Why are these just crying in the makeup room? But it was everything you would have wanted that email to be. You know what I mean? Like, he was just like, oh my God, I'm so sorry you've had to deal with this. I had no idea.
He's such a kind man.
The kindest person I've ever met.
The toughest part for me, and I will not try to get emotional right now, is I wanted my grandparents to know it was going to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
That was the tough part. I wish they could have been there for that moment to be like, all those fears that you had, like, you don't have to worry about it because he's a good man.
Right.
And that was a part that I think was really tough for me. And I wanted to share it with them.
Yeah.
Because I know that they were always so concerned. And I spoke to him that night, and I just was like, like, it was such a, and
you were like on a high.
I was on a high, and it wasn't, I actually to this day have not been emotional around him. Well, we did see Lady Gaga's Star is Born together, and I cried like a baby, so he saw that. But about the situation, I actually have not, it's not that I don't want to open myself up to him like that. I just don't feel that way around him. I feel so happy.
Right.
It's like that need to like be emotional and purge and all that around him. It's like, I don't even want to waste a single second being like that because I'm just so happy that he's actually here. Yeah. So.
And honestly, part of that is because of all, you did a lot of work on yourself internally, a lot of self-development up until that point. Like, yeah. So that when your dad did come into your life, like, it was at the perfect timing. Like,
I was in a shit show. Yeah.
Yeah. You had gotten through and healed a lot of parts of yourself. Whereas had you been younger and not as evolved, it would have been a very different experience, I think.
And my mom is more like at a stable level too. Like, she has, her own life, and she's been clean for decades. And, you know, it would have been so hard to like find him and bring him into that whole
Of course.
I mean, come
of
on.
course. Especially because he's literally like the sweetest
He's
guy
so
I've ever.
kind. I'm just like, what's wrong with you? Like, there has to, like, did you kill a squirrel when you were younger?
Yeah.
Like, anything? Like,
Yeah. And even
but-
like your stepmom, like
So, I mean, I'm
Yeah.
so happy. Like, that was
So
the biggest
grateful.
thing. I'm like, obviously, what are the, that chances are very high that he has a family of his own.
Right.
That
Other
he's married,
children.
other
Yeah.
children. Come to find out, he is married, never had kids of his own. Has a
is
stepdaughter, and all of them are so amazing and welcoming, and I couldn't be more thankful for that. Because, listen, as a woman,
as a wife.
you see some other chick trying to come in and be, you're my dad, you will probably get nervous.
Yeah.
You
of
are
course.
used to what your life is like.
Of course.
And now another female energy is coming in, and you're like, whoa, pump the brakes. What's
Yep.
happening? But she has been so amazing. I feel so blessed for that. And I will say, like, from the moment, like, talking to him first and then finally getting the paternity test was the longest week of my ever loving life.
Yeah.
I was like, I mean, come on. And I was actually by myself when I got it. And I was scrolling up and I saw the 999. And I literally, I mean, I know I'm dramatic, but I dropped my knees because I couldn't hold myself up.
Yeah.
But I knew the moment I heard his voice for the first time over the phone. I remember hanging up and I looked at Chris, I'm like, that's my dad. I know it.
It was so wild. That was like the wildest 2 weeks of your life, my life, like anyone who was with you during that time. Because it was literally like you were just like, I'm going to find my dad. And then like 2 weeks later, like you found
All
him.
I'm going to say is the book is going to be real good, which is in the making. But the book is going to be, I mean, I might have to apologize to a few people, but
Hey, it is what it is.
actually, no, I won't. No apologies.
You're just owning it.
I'm just
you gotta
gonna
own
own
it.
it.
It's
Get
just
over
part
it.
of the journey.
Yeah.
It's not about like somebody doing something wrong. Like even all this reflection, like your mom was going through her stuff. Like,
Yeah.
you know, as a mom, you can only do the best that you can do. Like it is what it is.
Yeah.
You know, you can't really sit here and blame people. It's easier to blame them.
Right.
It's harder to have compassion, but it is what it is.
Girl, yeah. We all have to, like, kind of cut each other, like, ourselves a break, you know? That's just what it is.
Yep.
And I will say, though, there's been a whole nother journey happening within myself, though, with forgiving my mom
Yeah.
and mending that relationship. And I am not the best at it. I will admit, I'm not good at it. I need to be better. Mm-hmm. I get frustrated and then I'm like, don't want to deal with it.
Yep.
And it's not like I get to talk to my dad every day either. He
Right.
lives on the other side of the country. You know, the whole texting and social media that's just not his vibe.
Yeah.
So it's hard. There's kind of a strong disconnect and I wish I could have more.
Yeah.
But I think it's us being more proactive and making the resources that we do have work for our benefit because that's just reality.
Of course.
And sometimes I forget that I found him.
Yeah.
Because we're a country apart. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh, that's right. That happened. Whoa. And it's wild.
And what was really funny is I was lucky enough to meet him, and you guys have such similar like personalities and interests, and it was just so funny.
It's crazy. Like I am a makeup artist, and he is is so talented painting.
Yep.
He's worked in TV and film in the past. I work in TV.
Yep.
And I'm like, is this real? Like,
right.
It's really true. Some things are just in your DNA.
Yeah. Even
of
like
how you are.
your sense of adventure. Like I'll never forget that photo of him standing at the edge of a cliff, looking over, like about to fall off. And then there's the same picture of you like at a different cliff. And it's like, you guys are the same. You're so similar. It's so funny.
It's so amazing too, because he says that I remind him a lot of his grandmother, who was a ginger.
Interesting.
And she loved national parks. And she was like, you know what? Yeah, this idea, we're going to go do it.
Right.
And she just made it happen. And she was like a fire pistol. He's like, you remind me. And he had such a close relationship with his grandmother.
That's so special.
So, you know, it's hearing these stories and seeing pictures. I'm like, wow, that's my other family. Like,
well, that's the whole thing. It's like you have this whole other family now. Like you have a third cousin in Kansas City, right?
Yeah. Yep. I have all these people and I'm just like, what? is happening. So
That is so cool.
It's crazy.
As a little girl, like, I know you kind of knew in your head, like you said earlier, like, oh, I'm going to find my dad. But could you ever imagine what it would have felt like?
No, because I think I didn't understand so many elements about myself and layers about myself, or just life in general. It was just fear.
Okay.
I think I was so fearful of being rejected.
Of course.
Because it too, it came with my mom's relationships. She put kind of men before me. So I was so afraid that I was not going to be first.
Yeah.
That he was going to reject me.
Enough, yeah.
And it was going to be horrible. And that's why I would just go to my imagination. My imagination was my happy spot, because I could, manifest this world in my head that it would work out to be okay.
Right.
And it would be perfect.
Right.
And I think that kind of worked against me going into my adulthood, because I felt a very disconnected from reality, because I would create this whole fantasy in my head.
Yeah.
And
But
I
it's
would
how
try
you
to
survive.
Yeah, it was my survival skill. It truly was. And I'm not even making an excuse. It really was. And I think that's why I'm not as fucked up as you would think once you hear all the stories. But I really had to retrain myself going into adulthood to break those habits.
Yeah.
And really live in reality.
Yeah.
And live in the moment and be present. And with, just human connection with friends, with family, with, my husband, all of that.
Yeah.
I really wanted to just run away from it and live this fantasy.
Yeah.
And so the toughest part is to know our faults and know the things that make us maybe not, the best at life, to know them, accept them, learn from them, because there's all lessons within them, and release them.
Yeah.
And we have the ability to change it.
Yeah.
And, so many people say to me, well, given like your childhood and how you grew up, like, I would always say, listen, there are other children that went through worse things than me.
Of course.
Because there are. I'm very fortunate in many aspects to have some awesome and amazing families and people in my life. But I have a huge pet peeve about when people use how they grew up as their crutch. Well, that's just what I knew. That's all. It's
Right.
just, I'm like, nope. For
Not good
me,
enough. Yeah.
if that were the case, then I should have been pregnant when I was young, into drugs, let a man beat the shit out of me.
Yep.
Like all those things. I was like, we have the ability to change it.
Of course.
It takes a lot of strength to do it. It's tough. I'm not saying it's easy. It's because it's not. And so you have to, but you just have to be willing to like dive into that.
Yep.
That's the tough work. That's the tough work.
That is the tough
and
work.
it's a constant, right?
Evolution.
It's like evolution. We are always trying to learn from ourselves. So the day
course.
we die.
Of
If you
course.
say that I don't have anything to learn, then you're a liar. I'm
You're
sorry.
in that fantasy land.
You're in,
Yeah.
Tiffany's Fantasyland. Roller
On the
coaster,
carousel, yeah.
like at the Big E Carnival, just like, hey.
Hey.
Yeah, no, then so we're constantly learning, and I've learned so much I've learned so much from you, from things that you've gone through. I've learned so much watching my mom, all these other people,
Of
or
course.
people that have had perfect, quote unquote, perfect lives.
Yep. No such thing.
No such thing. I've learned, if we can't learn from one another and take just a moment to try to see it from that other person's point of view, or their struggle, or where it's rooted, then I really think that we're doing ourselves a disadvantage.
Yeah.
And we have to allow ourselves to be vulnerable.
Yep.
I always thought crying or being vulnerable was a sign of weakness. I now see it as this biggest sign of strength that
Amen.
a person could possibly have.
Amen.
And that's how you come into your power.
Yep.
That's how you come into who you are and being comfortable with who you are, by being vulnerable.
Yep.
And yeah.
And I think that's like where we end this, because that was perfect.
I mean, yeah. No.
No, but really, your story to me is so fascinating. Like you just said, if you were to look on a piece of paper, your life should have looked a lot differently than what it looks. You're probably the one of the most hardworking and genuine people I know. Like, you're my person. If I always say to my husband, John, I'm like, I can be my 100% true self with Tiffany.
Vice versa.
I don't have to put on a show. I could be sad. I could be happy. I could be mad. And it's always okay. And to me, that's what I'm so grateful for.
And I love that. And I appreciate you saying that. Because I think, I enjoy watching people try to put on a show. Because I'm like, go ahead. You're going to be exhausted by the end of the day. But this is what you feel like you need to do. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Because I fully feel at this point in my life, I can be 100% just, if I don't like you, then, I'm just going to sit there and just do my own thing.
Yeah.
If I'm into you, you're going to know it.
Yep.
And I'm not going to apologize for it anymore because I don't think any of us should.
No.
Why? We shouldn't force ourselves to feel differently than how we organically really feel.
Right.
As humans,
and it goes back to
another.
what you were saying earlier about like trusting your instincts and knowing what you want to do or who you are.
I just think if you're in a relationship with someone, and I am not perfect. I've made a lot of mistakes, but you learn from them. But now in this moment, I feel I can just be like, yeah, I'm not into you.
Yep.
And it's okay. It's not a sign of disrespect. I'm just trying to be honest.
Yeah.
People can't take honesty, Fee.
No.
People,
They don't
because
like
you know
it.
what? It makes them feel uncomfortable.
Yeah,
and again,
of
if you're not willing to be vulnerable and uncomfortable, then this life can be a long ride for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
It
it's
is.
hard. It's hard because it's hard to feel safety in that, but I think it comes down to surrounding yourself with people who you can trust, people who you can be your full self
And that
with.
challenge you.
Yeah. And that
check
challenge
you.
you and check you and be like, hey, friend.
Challenge you, check you, accept you.
Yep. And help you grow.
And allow
Yeah.
you room to grow, release, heal, all
Yeah.
those things.
And just know
Yeah.
that it's an evolution. It's going to change. And that's just
till
the
the
expected
day you die.
for reals.
Well, thanks for having me. This
I'm
is
so
amazing.
excited.
I loved it. I feel like I need to go have a drink because I feel like this is like a therapy session.
Yeah,
too,
a little
so.
bit, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, thank you, friend. Love you so much. That's going to wrap up our interview with Tiffany. Tiff, thank you so much for being on the show. I love you and I appreciate our friendship more than you could ever know. If you guys want to learn more on how you can connect with Tiffany, I'm going to link everything for you, so make sure to check out the show notes. I appreciate you all listening so much, and please, if you enjoyed this episode, I would love it for you to subscribe and to share it with a friend. By you spreading the word, it really allows for the podcast to grow and for me to bring you new content and new guests every week. I also want to give a little shout out to all the patrons who are supporting the show each and every month with their contributions. Thank you all for your continued support. You guys can follow along with me at Clarity Through Chaos Podcast on Instagram and Patreon, and my website, claritythroughchaospodcast.com. All right, that's all I got for you guys this time. Catch you next week.